And the webinar is live. Fantastic. I see folks joining, which is always the sign that I've done something right in the Zoom world, which you never really know. So this is amazing.
Sarah, would you say that we have magic to do today?
Mark, I think I would say that we have magic to do just for you. Just for you. You at home and you, Mark Lunsford. Yes.
We should have waited for more people to be in before we...
We can repeat it later and pretend like it was something new and we did off the cuff. We're in theater, right? We can recreate that atmosphere of spontaneity. I think for everyone who saw it that was spontaneous. So that's Mark Lunsford's genius. We are so happy to have everyone here today joining us for the very first lunchroom of 2021. And I think everyone at home, we all deserve a little bit of a pause for surviving 2020. We're just really grateful to be back on your screens in the new year. I'm Sarah Schofield-Manser. I'm the A.R.T's Assistant Director of Special Events and Partnerships. I use the she series of pronouns. I am a white woman with it's been getting longer throughout the course of the lunchroom series, long dark hair. I am wearing a bright blue button-up blouse. I'm wearing little Apple headphones and sitting in a swivel chair. So you may see me rocking back and forth because I do it absent-mindedly. I would also like to take a minute to acknowledge that the Loeb Drama Center and the Oberon Theater occupy the indigenous and unceded land of the Massachusetts people, and that I myself today am calling from unceded territory of the Massachusetts, Wabanaki, Pennacook, and Pentucket people. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat for everyone if you would like to investigate the indigenous land that you are all calling in from at home. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm great. We've officially spanned years with the lunchroom.
We have. You're right. If we had a Wikipedia page, we would formally have the dash there. I do it's like a metric for me.
I'm waiting for someone to make that Wikipedia page.
I don't have the skill to do it, but I would love to see one. Maybe, I think. Now, we'll see.
Hi, everyone. Mark Lunsford here. I'm back with you a second week in a row. Very excited. I'm the artistic producer here at the A.R.T. I take the he series of pronouns. I'm a white man with a beard that is getting longer also as the day goes by. Brown hair, wearing a black sweater, and I have sort of a midnight blue jacket with a black lapel on. Very excited. Last week we talked to Norm Lewis about Porgy and Bess. This week we're getting to have a great conversation with Gypsy about Pippin. And so I feel like I've really been traveling this road of A.R.T. nostalgia for myself. So, selfishly for me, it's been a very exciting 2 weeks to walk down memory lane a little bit.
For me too.
Yeah.
Really digging it.
Again, thank you all for joining us. We've got a great group today. So we're so happy to have you tuned in. A few things before we jump in. We are, right back at it with some great virtual events coming up in the next few days. So tomorrow night, our behind the scenes series returns with a conversation with playwright Kate Hamill about her adaptation of The Odyssey. And then this week, we are also debuting sort of a one-night only performance with our friends at Houseboy, which is a great drag performance DJ dance night at Oberon that we are taking virtually this year. So you can join us, I believe, on Friday night for that. And Sarah, I just put the link in the chat with a link to all the shows upcoming.
Yes, indeed.
And then we have our January lineup already announced for the lunchroom. We have Brian Quijada joining us next week, fantastic composer, musician, performer, who is the composer of Dragon Baby, the next installment in the Sarah Porkalov Dragon Cycle. So we're very excited to talk to Brian about all of his work next week. Followed by Lisa Yancey of Yancey Consulting, who has joined us as a thought partner as we move forward. And A.R.T. is an anti-racist and anti-oppressive institution. So she'll be in conversation with Anna Fitzloff, our managing director, on the 19th. And then we will round out the month with a very exciting conversation. Ira Mont, Sharika Niles, Alfredo Macias, and Taylor Brennan with a little stage management roundtable hosted by yours truly. So that's going to be a very, it sounds nerdy, but all the stage managers watching are going to be very excited because you will all be blown away at the amount of work and responsibility that a stage manager takes on to keep a production moving forward.
And there's nothing wrong with nerdy, Mark, just to be extremely clear about it.
All right. I think we should jump in. What do you think, Sarah?
Amazing. That sounds good. I think that's my cue to hop off screen. So as always, it's lovely to see you all. Lovely to talk to you, Mark. Have a great conversation. And if anyone has questions for Gypsy or Mark, you can submit them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Note that it is different from the chat feature. So if you want a good chance for Mark to see your question, please submit it to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll reserve about 15 minutes at the end of the hour for questions.
Thanks, Sarah.
I leave you. I'll see you later.
Great. Gypsy, do you want to come into the lunchroom? Hi.
Hello, Mark.
It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. Looking quite snazzy, quite the ringmaster.
So I usually, honestly and truly, I very rarely wear sweats on Zoom. Mostly because it's like a psychological thing, or I'm at work, I want to feel like I'm at work, whatever. But today, I had to pull out the Pippin sweat.
Yeah. All right. That's good because we're going to be doing a little bit of tumbling around toward the second half of this. So you're going to just fit right in.
Great. I'm going to exhibit some moves for folks in my living room. I have a strong point. There's some silks I'm going to fly in a minute. Don't worry about it.
Good. This is going to be so entertaining.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining, Gypsy. You just want to introduce yourself for all of our friends watching?
Yes. My name is Gypsy Snider. I am coming to you from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I noticed someone also put on nativelands.canada. So you guys can look, there's an incredible amount of native lands that converge right where I'm seated. I am she, her. And you will hear in the background my dog chewing on a bone as we are going into a serious new stage of lockdown in Montreal, including curfews, which are beginning this week. So we're definitely hunkered down on a snowy day in Montreal, Quebec.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's so exciting to have you back. And, we worked closely because I was the company manager when we did Pippin. And so we worked together quite a bit, but then we've also just luckily had sort of like chance encounters and meetings over the last few years. Yeah. But I was thinking when I moved into the house where I live now, when we were in tech I think we had just opened, or it was a couple nights before we opened officially in Cambridge, Pippin. And that was in January. So on January 1st, just a couple days ago, I was like, oh, this is my 8-year anniversary in my house, which then suddenly reminded me that it had been 8 years since we did Pippin at A.R.T.
Yeah, quite an incredible 8 years journey that it has been with this show. The Lobe was so amazing. In the sense of, I did a lot of the show, even through the run after we opened, through previews, after we opened, even opening night, where I would spend part of the show backstage, just making sure everything was running properly. So I was constantly running past your office to go from like backstage to the back row of the audience, and just seeing you with the light on. I mean, the hours you guys put in to make that whole machine work, it was so awesome. There's something in the way that the Lobe is constructed that you really feel every sort of part of the mechanism making the show happen. And that was just so lovely to be there. I felt so at home.
Yeah, I so agree with you. When I came to interview, I had heard so much about the A.R.T. and I had never been to Boston for that matter. And I was like, okay, I'm going to the A.R.T. And I was just working at a theater that had this brand new, beautiful theater that I'd been working in for a year. And so I was like, can't wait to see what A.R.T.'s like. And I got there and I was like, huh, what an unassuming place. But then you get inside of it, I agree with you. It's just everything.
Vibe of things happening.
Yeah.
Well, and we would have Diane's kids. Diane Paulus has 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters. And they would literally be running around that back hallway upstairs, going into sort of the rehearsal halls, playing with Haley Bennett and Ken. I don't know if you remember, 2 music assistants.
Oh, Kevin Lynn?
Yes. Yeah. So it was just show would be rolling and we'd have this daycare running around upstairs in the offices. It was amazing. Just really a very sort of beehive community of all these different sort of facets and costume department, set department. It was so wonderful to be there and to create this thing there.
I agree. It really helped because the theater I was looking before, the prop shop was in one place and the shop was actually in a different state, so it was like everything was sort of decentralized. And it was kind of nice for me coming into that environment. Like we're all right here, we're all on top of it, and we're all sort of like centered around that theater where the magic is happening, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great creative zone.
Yeah. So I have a lot to talk about with Pippin, obviously. And I want to spend a lot of time there. But I think before we get started, we have a lot of folks who maybe are new to A.R.T. or at least new since we've done Pippin. And so I'd love to talk just a little bit about like your background, specifically kind of what sparked your interest in circus. Where did you sort of get bit by the bug, as to say? And how that evolved for you, how you sort of trained and got into the circus world.
So I was born in San Francisco, California in 1970. My parents were working with the San Francisco Mime Troupe, which is at the time was a pretty radical political theater company doing free shows. For the most part, free shows outside, sometimes in theaters, but mostly really trying to create political theater that was going to be accessible to people and very sort of musical theater / commedia dell'arte, but really about sharing sort of the complexities of the political situation in the 70s. So I was already being sort of dragged around by this political theater troupe from birth. And then through that, my parents, my stepdad was a juggler from New York City. Most of my family is actually from New York. And he was kind of teaching commedia dell'arte and acrobatics and circus to the troupe. And from there, he and my mother created a small sort of comedy juggling act with 2 women and 1 man, Cecil McKinnon, my mother, Peggy Snyder, my stepfather, Larry Pizzoni, and it was called the Pickle Family Jugglers. And we were pretty much bi-coastal. We were in the summers in New York City performing in Central Park. We did like cameo stuff on, what was it called? There was a TV show in, with like a farmer guy. Oh my God, I can't remember.
Yeehaw?
Huh? It wasn't Yeehaw. Oh, that would have been awesome. It was a green. Oh my God. The overalls.
Green Acres.
Huh?
I'm thinking of Green Acres now, but
yeah, no, it wasn't Green Acres. It was a kids' TV show. It was on, I think, even on PBS. But so they were just doing their variety act sort of all over the place, and it really kind of picked up momentum. And so finally, they changed it from the Pickle Family Jugglers to the Pickle Family Circus, which was really sort of coming into its being around the same time that Big Apple Circus was coming into being in New York City. And my stepdad was juggling partners with Paul Binder, who founded the Big Apple. So there was sort of these 2 very different entities creating kind of more contemporary circus in the United States. And I wouldn't necessarily have ever labeled Big Apple as contemporary, but the experience, the immersive experience that was Big Apple was sort of happening at the same time that the Pickle Family Circus was coming into its own in San Francisco. And my stepfather, Larry Pizzoni, was working with Bill Irwin and Jeff Hoyle. And the heart of the show was really the clowning. And there was sort of a deep theatrical element to it, even though it wasn't what we would now call contemporary circus. And I was sort of from very early on exposed to theater at the same time. So my circus world and the theater world were really evolving at the same time. And so as soon as I went to American Conservatory of Theater youth program, I was doing circus, but I knew sort of instinctively the whole time that the only thing that was going to really interest me is if the circus was actually telling some kind of story, or really that the acrobatics was used more like a physical theater technique as opposed to just let me wow you. Yeah. And the wow factor is always fun. And I am, that is in my heart and soul important to me, but I don't want to just have the wow factor. I want there to be some kind of theatrical connection to what's happening before the wow. finds its place. So I would say from a really early age, I was really trying to balance both. And then I ended up moving to Switzerland when I was 18 I got a degree in physical theater at the Dimitri School. Dimitri was a clown from Switzerland, very famous European clown who studied with Marcel Marceau and Lecoq and through working with him over 6-7 years is where I really was sort of like, okay, how do I balance out like the spectacle and the story? After that, went on to be an artist at Cirque du Soleil, doing more character work, but a lot of pretty hardcore acrobatics. And through my time at Cirque du Soleil, I connected with 6 other performers who were also interested in going further with more dance, theater, and music exploration. And those 6 other partners became the co-founders of the Seven Fingers, which les sept doigts de la main, the 7 fingers of the hand, is the name of our company. We go as the 7 Fingers nowadays, just to simplify. But that's really sort of the parkour of my life, and the 7 Fingers is 100% predicated on the idea that contemporary circus can tell a story or share an idea and an emotion using circus. In a theatrical context. So, was that what you wanted to hear?
That was great. No, it sort of leads me to the next question, which is, I think often, like, in particular, when I talk to choreographers, right, there's like a lot of choreographers will have had like this training, this intense career as a dancer, and then in that performance career start to be interested in what it would be to choreograph or to direct, right? That's not true for everyone, of course, but I feel like that's like a common theme that I hear from choreographers. But what I'm hearing you say and talking about your history is that like this idea of sort of being a choreographer, director, sort of zoomed out creator was kind of always with you, it sounds like, from the start.
Absolutely. I directed my first circus show when I was 15. I went to a kind of the urban high school in San Francisco, which is very sort of creative. It's a pretty intense academic school, but they had incredible programs that sort of allowed me to have my circus lifestyle. We had a lot of students there who were at the San Francisco Ballet, and urban really was a wonderful platform for me to try things. And there was a kind of amateurish circus class along with the musical theater class and the dance classes. And in my sophomore year, the teacher there let me coach and direct the end of the year performance for the circus. And I was very, very, very much knowing that what I wanted to do, I was going to have to create myself.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe the difference that you're feeling is that, yeah, I wanted to perform. I was really driven and sort of had that adrenaline. I was never a very good acrobat. I was not an excellent technician. And I think that was because I was always more, unable to just focus on the trick. I was always much more interested in how the trick came to be and why it was there and who was performing the trick and why was the trick even necessary. And so all of that philosophical work took up a lot of my mind space. And so I was really concentrated on the creative process and how circus could be creative. I will say that something that is also different for a circus, someone up and coming in circus versus someone up and coming in dance or in theater, is that circus doesn't have a standardized form. If you're a circus performer, it really celebrates the individual. It was Captain Kangaroo. Come on, thank you, Wayne Olson. I just saw Captain Kangaroo pop up. My parents performed on Captain Kangaroo. Anyway, thank you for that. So circus really is much more about individual expression and being the best that you can be with your physical body type or your story. You get to create your own act. So every circus performer is slightly their own director and choreographer, which means it's also very difficult for a circus performer to then blend in with a normal theater director or choreographer because they've just spent their whole life sort of perfecting what they do and their style. So we're not challenged as much. I went to theater school from a very young age where it's like, I have to learn to play Juliet or, and this is something that I get to interpret, but also through the eyes of the director or the theater teacher. And in Circus, you are much more, you create this bubble around your creative process that's very individualistic. And then your act gets hired more and more. With contemporary circus, you're finding performers who are hired to become interpreters. Like, for example, if you're coming in with the Seven Fingers, we're going to take what your specialty is, but we're going to direct it and choreograph it and put it within a larger context, which is the shows that we write.
Yeah.
We collaborate with the artists, obviously, to create that work. But in the end, we're still writing and choreographing the piece.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about that brings forward like being in the back of the Lobe and having a conversation where I think I just said to you, like, so what is the understudy situation for circus performers to the show? And you were like, we don't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? And I heard you saying like, well, if someone goes down, you just do it with 5 instead of 6. And it blew my mind, that it could be
not just your mind. The producer's mind, the Weisslers, it blew Diane's mind. I mean, there's no two circus people who are the same. And so the biggest challenge in creating Pippin specifically was, one, I needed the kind of performers who were really strong, had really strong character work on stage, physical presence. Even if they weren't dancers, they had to have really there are a lot of circus performers who have a difficult time walking across the stage, and being able to give texture to the way they own a character on stage. And that's something that I spend probably, when I'm creating a show, we spend the first half of the creative process just working on physical presence and character. Because that's just not something that most circus people, even ones who've gone to sort of higher education, they just don't have a large vocabulary and understanding of creating that character work and that physical presence. So when we can talk about the casting of Pippin later, because I think that was just such an incredible process. But finding circus performers who were going to do the kind of work that I do at the level that I was talking about doing, but also being as versatile as I needed to be able to do the whole show. Most people come in and do their act and then maybe a little bit of other things. Here, they were not coming to do their act. I needed them to use their skills and their bodies and their characters to paint throughout the show something that was going to push Pippin forward. And then if someone was injured, well, then we had to replace a move or an actual person within the troupe of 7 that we had in the show. And then if it looked like that injury was going to be more than a week, then I had to look into replacing them with someone who had the closest skill set and personality. There were just certain tricks that you needed in the show. Like, you needed to finish Simple Joys with this trick through the hoop. It was what elevated the leading player. It's what capped the number. I'm trying to think of other examples. There were just certain things. I mean, obviously the Bertha routine, having the trapeze partner. There were things that really were integral to the story. And so I did learn how to, actually, I was going to say I did teach the production how to integrate new circus performers, but it was like I was the traditions and rules and the way that Broadway functions, I, to this day, have defied in ways that has meant Pippin has been so hands-on for me for 8 years now with the touring productions and casting and maintenance and circus equipment maintenance and all of that. It's just been so hands-on for so many years because there's never been 2 performers that have been able to do the exact same thing that the original cast did.
I definitely also remember having a conversation, I think with Orion, when he's like, hey, I'm going to come in on Monday and like train. Can I just have some space on stage? And I was like, well, you can't do that. He was like, I don't understand. I said, well, it's your union day off. I can't let you come in and work on that day. He's like, well, I don't care about that. I need to come in and train. I was like, yeah, I can't. I can't let that happen.
We broke a lot of rules, which now, was really naive and rebellious, but we would rehearse off hours in the lobby at, wherever we could. We'd come in early when we weren't allowed to. We were, there was Circus, and then what the crazy thing was, then we would get stage time. We'd get up on the stage, and it's so complicated to walk and talk everything through that we'd get on stage, and Diane and Nancy, assistant director, would be like, "What are you guys doing? This is your stage time. Use it." And I'm like, "I know it looks like we're doing nothing. I promise you, this is what we need to do." And it got to a point where I had to tell the acrobats, "I know you want to talk through it. You can't talk through it." And then we would still talk through it. Acrobatics is so much like, I'm going to be here. You're going to do this, in the space, understanding the dimensions and the distances that we're going to be tossing people. Oof.
Yeah. But all the while, you've got 15 other performers who are not acrobats.
Going, what are they doing? Oh, yeah.
So I wonder, it's interesting to hear you talk about your history, because I think some folks would assume, like, what was it in to come into this new world of music theater? But like, this was not a new world for you. You had always been thinking about the theatricality of what the circus performance is and what it is to bring narrative into the story, right? So I wonder, from that point, if you ever felt any kind of, not tension as in conflict, but needing to sort of negotiate this understanding between both music theater performers and circus performers to like integrate those worlds and integrate those processes so folks sort of understood. Because I guess I bring this up because I would think a lot about, I would come at the end of a rehearsal with the acrobats, and the singers will have been in the back, and they're just like, oh my, like blown away, right? Like, how would I can't believe that's so incredible. And then one of my favorite moments was to go to the end of a vocal rehearsal the next day, and the acrobats coming out being like, what? They just heard Patina Miller riffing on something, and they just heard like the whole chorus singing, whatever, think about the sun at the end. And that same sort of wow that was coming from the acrobats. And I just wonder, you feel sort of uniquely positioned in understanding both those worlds and what that felt like for you.
Well, you just brought up something that really actually made me kind of emotional. When growing up, I think my first VHS cassette was Singing in the Rain. When I was a kid in the 70s, we were show people. And circus definitely had its niche, and it's sort of kind of on the outskirts of society, and it's a very rebellious, nomadic art form that really does kind of, in its gypsy-like way, kind of needs to have its own set of rules that are not spoken or written, but that are really understood in our community, and we hold really tight to that. But we were raised show people, and a lot of the same ethics that you're going to find in musical theater and respect and really pushing boundaries. Like, I think that's the language that both forms respect and know of each other. And what made me emotional, though, is what I'm finding is that circus nowadays, the contemporary circus scene, is not as connected to old show forms. It's like this new generation doesn't. I was working on a piece, a COVID-friendly circus piece this year, and I was, I was referencing like a time step or something, and they had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, like tap dance, hoofers, like all of that was so. I think we did time steps like in choreography, like in little routines, and it was like you learned how to tap as a circus performer when I was a kid. It was kind of part of the Donald O'Connor genre, and I'm a little concerned that as all these art forms are kind of exploding through the internet, the connectivity is not being made. So, and that was slightly true of the people that I was hiring or continue to hire for Pippin, where I have to convince the performers that I hire, you want to have this creative experience in your career. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to be on stage at this, doing the work of Stephen Schwartz and Bob Fosse, Chet Walker, Diane, Nadia, just like this heightened how can I make this moment so pure and so clear and deliver it to the audience? This is the kind of work I have to convince them that this is what they want to do, because they're not doing their act. They're not doing their best tricks. They're not featured performers. So I have to, when I'm in the audition process, I have to talk people through why this is going to be an experience unlike any other, but that's going to make them better performers in the long run. And I would say hands down, every single circus performer that's done Pippin over the last 8 years has written me and thanked me, because it was such a growing and learning experience as like how to be on stage. Like even just the Fosse, like selling the merchandise, like here I am and I'm going to like break through that fourth wall and get the audience engaged in what's happening. And that was really the casting too. I think, Diane and Chet and Nadia and I wanted the best in each department. It wasn't like, let's get a bunch of people who can do everything. If we have the best circus performers, they're going to be the best singers. Even if vocally they don't have the training, they're going to give themselves to the vocal work, just like Patina gave herself to the trapeze or to the hula hoop, because she's that excellent in what she does. She knows that she's going to do hula hoop on stage. It has to be as strong as her vocal performance. And that was really, I think, the mantra behind the casting was like, don't get a bunch of people who can do, like dancers who can do a little bit of aerial or do a little bit of gymnastics. It was like, get the best Broadway Fosse vocal triple threats, get the best acrobats who have character and movement. And then you're not going to see the difference between them, because they're all fighting for this excellence on stage that is required in the story of Pippin.
Sort of what you just talked about, I want to have a bit of a conversation around how a show like Pippin that already has such an iconic movement vocabulary in the Fosse, and now you're bringing this other very specific movement language into. When that curtain drops, you're seeing so many incredible circus things hit you at once, right? Like you've got the hoops happening, people are on the pole, the silks it's like all coming at you, and you've just been given like Charlotte Dubois, who's like a master of Fosse, and Andrew Martin, who's a master of humor. It's just these like titans of these styles that are coming into the show. It like takes your breath away.
Oh yeah. It really like it when we just put up the show in Australia, and yet I'm still getting like emotional. I didn't realize that was the Lobe. That wasn't Broadway, right? That was. I was already going like, oh, that's why we did make some changes between the Lobe and Broadway. Terrence Mann, it's like all of them. The casting was just incredible on every level. I can just see Chet and Diane and Nadia, like how to make that. I can't tell you how long we worked to make that moment work. I feel like half of the rehearsals was spent on Magic to Do.
Was it basically the whole like 3-week summer workshop just about the opening number?
Just Magic to Do. It was just Magic to Do. It's just like layer on top of layer on top of layer. And then realizing that was the Lobe, and kind of going, oh, that's why we moved Orion over here and this person over there, and this idea that. So we were tossing this girl, Lolita, across the stage. So you swing her like a basket, toss her, she does a double twist and lands literally across the stage in someone else's arms. And then Chet's like, okay, the dancers are going to slide underneath. And the dancers are sliding on 2. And on 2, we have to have her in the middle of her double twist right over them. So we've got these like bodies that are creating this diagonal form across the stage. But trying to calculate how many counts it takes to tempo the girl into the basket, swing her out, swing her back, and then toss her so that she's midair on 2. I mean, first of all, just lift your leg on 7, right? Okay, that's easy. Lift your leg on 7. Lift up, but then they have to synchronize their movement of 3 people, and you're feeling like, oh, he's pulling a little bit more. Oh, it's so exact and yet so not exact. And if your muscles are more pumped one day, or if you're more tired one day, you're going to give more oomph here, and then you're going to give more rotation here. So I would say to them, like, she lifts her foot on 7, 8, she falls into the basket. 9, she's swinging up to here. But if they're thinking, I've got to get her body here on 1, not 9, on 1, then you're not organically feeling this, the centrifugal force that you're trying to get. So it just got to a point where I was like, no, up on 7. And they're looking at me like, what's 7? What's 7? What's this number that you're talking? I'm not relating to, it was just, and a lot of them hadn't had a lot of choreographic, like learning choreography on counts. We do in the 7 Fingers, we do a lot on counts, but then it always works like this. You've got a certain choreography that's on counts. And then at some point you say, now don't think about the counts. Now you're listening to a musical instrument, or you want this. It's much easier for an acrobat to say, I'm going to be in the air on the cymbal crash, or I'm going to, because it has to feel organic, not mathematical. And just the time to figure that out when you have the entire cast, all the leads on stage, scared for their lives because this body is being thrown across the stage. It's like, add the stress level to it. That was why we had to work on the side so often, because we would establish it with everyone, and then we would have to like go, how am I going to make this work for you as an acrobat? Especially because those acrobats hadn't even worked together before. We had a little, like Lolita and Jan had worked together, Greg and Phil had worked together. They had kind of worked together a little bit as a team, but then the other 3 acrobats had never worked, and the other 3 acrobats didn't even come. Like Jan and Greg, Phil was my student when he was like 7. So I had done a ton of work with them. I was their teacher at the National Circus School and directed their final performance at the National Circus. I had a lot of experience with them. Mm-hmm. Phil had toured for the 7 Fingers for years. But Orion, who's like traditional circus, street performer, his own schedule, his own tricks. He trains with other people, trains with his family, but not to this extent. Victoria Grimmy comes from a traditional circus family out of Russia, learned from her parents. And then you've got Olga Karmansky, highest level national team for rhythmic gymnastics. Mm-hmm. Like getting them to work together on top of getting them to work together with the cast was a lot.
I mean, I was thinking a lot too about Bettina, because it's no secret to anyone about her vocal prowess and her ability as a music theater performer. But I thought stepping into that role, she had to learn one of the most iconic Fosse dances, the Manson Trio, right? So she had to like drill the Manson Trio and learn that vocabulary, and also learn trapeze and and just like watching her sort of determination to just like slice through all of that, right, was really wild.
There's just, I'm gonna tell you, I could say this almost about every lead in the show, but Bettina is such a technician, such a beast. I was scared of her. Like, we would, if it ever happened that we're in rehearsals for some number and she's not on stage, which was rare because she's like in every freaking number. I mean, her and Matthew James Thomas were just on stage 24/7. But she would grab me if neither of us was directly involved with what was happening on stage. She'd pull me into the lobby at the Loeb, into the foyer, and with the hula hoop or whatever it was, and just work out every detail of the movement. So for example, she's doing hula hoop, which you think is easy, but singing and hula hooping and looking as badass as she does, it's no easy task. And then in it, we had this thing where she would have to go from the hula hoop, catch it, bring it, like sort of guide it over her body into having it over her head. And to make that look like butter, just like so smooth, was, I mean, it's so stupid, but when you're hula hooping and you want to stop the hula hoop with like flawlessly and then change the direction, we went through it over and over and over again, because I think she knew even more than me that like it had, anything she did on that stage, she had to own it more than anyone else. Like being the ringmaster is like, you own the show. You are responsible for all these people. I can't look like I'm trying to do hula hoop. It has to be like the hula hoop is happening without me making any effort at all. Yeah. Trapeze, same thing. And, it's incredible when you're used to being the person that pushes people, but then to have a performer push you in that way to understand how to make it work for her character. You know, in hula hoop, you wouldn't normally think like leading player in hula hoop, but you could very easily look stupid. It could look like I look stupid. You know, it's kind of like a silly gesture.
Wow.
And yet she brought the Fosse hips into it. We really were able to sort of connect it to the global picture without making her look weak or childlike or silly. She really,
Well, and her and Matthew together, you know, we did this 10th anniversary music theater sort of review a couple years ago around Thanksgiving. And I remember on opening night, Patina was coming as sort of special guest, and we just said to her, Matthew, like, could you do the right track? Like, and they were like, are you kidding me? And then 30 minutes later, they had remembered all the choreo, basically the entire thing, and just like popped it right out. And you're like, it's been, 6 years since you have seen each other.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I say that about Patina, and it really was particular with Patina, but I would say the same for Matthew James Thomas, who had just come off of Spider-Man. He knows that he wants to make this as athletic and dynamic as possible. And when we did the Lobe, when we're doing the number Extraordinary, we hadn't yet moved to what it became on Broadway with the farm animals and the, so he held Extraordinary, which is vocally no easy task. And we created this whole kind of like, it was like a Buster Keaton style Charlie Chaplin, where he basically did parkour over the entire set by himself.
Yeah.
And like
my company management self is in the house being like, okay, cool. This is great.
And trying to like match physically alone on stage what he did with the vocal height of like this extraordinary song. We had him doing like the Bill Irwin, like the stairs down behind the bed, then jump out of the bed, and jump off the bed onto the pole, then climb up the pole and leap from the pole onto the chute, and then cross the chute like you're on a wire. I mean, a lot of things we ended up still doing in the number when it became like the farm scene, but he was owning that by himself. And I don't know how he did it 8 shows a week. I mean, to the end of the run, I don't know how anyone does Pippin 8 shows a week, but he took it to that level, just like Patina did, just like Terrence Mann did, Charlotte Dunbois. And everybody was like, how can I make this the 3-ring circus that it needs to be? And that was just so exciting.
I do want to, we got some questions coming in from the audience. I definitely want to get to those. But before we do, I also just want to talk a bit about the 7 fingers, because I feel like that it also like feeds so much of like what it was to do Pippin. And you've had such a history. I'm sure many folks who are watching have seen a lot of your shows because you've had at least 4 shows at Arts Emerson.
Oh boy, Arts Emerson. This is what's so amazing in your radius, your land mass of Boston, Cambridge, to have had such an incredible relationship with A.R.T. and at the same time with Arts Emerson, David Dower, now David House. They're doing, it's such incredible work that I find so different from what's happening at A.R.T. And yet somehow there's an incredible connective tissue there. Over 10 years, we did almost every single show in our 7 Fingers repertory has played at Arts Emerson. Trace has played multiple times. And they really did something that was interesting. And it's pretty rare for a theater to do this, where they really became kind of like a supporter of the company and the evolution of an expression, and sort of recognized, I think Arts Emerson really recognized that contemporary circus is something that's evolving around the world. And yet in the United States, it's incredibly stinted. There is this idea of using circus really as a form of expression. I think Arts Emerson really hooked onto that and really said, okay, we want to be part of this evolution in the United States. And Diane clearly also has had a love affair with contemporary circus as well, and was really sort of aware of what contemporary circus was doing before I came on board she had just done a Cirque du Soleil show and sort of had heard of us through Cirque du Soleil. I think had seen videos. Barry Weissler came and saw our show La Vie, a midnight show at Pier 17 in like 2006 or something. Dark underground cabaret show that we were doing for a year down on Pier 17. And he saw the show, and I go meet Barry after in his office on Times Square. He's like, the Seven Fingers, I don't know what to do with you, but I love you guys. and so, I think what Arts Emerson gave us a platform, helped us to really evolve something that in the United States, most people would come and see our shows and go like, what is that? Well, it's not Cirque du Soleil. It's not Ringling Brothers. What is that? And so Arts Emerson has been just a huge supporter of our work.
I want to show this one clip for folks to sort of give them a taste, right, of the aesthetic, I think. And then we'll come right back to the conversation. Here we go.
Reversing towards the end and not the beginning. Reversing towards the end and not the beginning. The uptick seconds hand removed and replaced by minutes running away. Challenged and corrupted and reserved, resigned, the choice to continue to know to bang my head. I choose to bang my head. Wall, hands, a mental capacity to overtake it and let it go. The ocean you didn't go to see, the ocean you saw in another day's light, with nothing in character or mist to solve the stepping in omnidirectional pull, to leaden, to flatten. Reality is given, freeing the exposition through a lens of self-denial like escapism. If I was a nihilist kind, if I wasn't an anachronistic soul, running around cut off head, not banged, not freed, flattened in true sense,
Wow.
So that clip strikes me, and I've watched it a few times since you shared it. And it strikes me because it's a rehearsal, as a theater practitioner, it's a rehearsal room that I know with a style of performance that I don't, which is doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know those rolling flats. I know what's happening in that rehearsal, except I don't know what that performance is.
So that was a little clip that we did after a workshop for a show. So we were just sort of documenting the work and kind of getting, that was stage one of the creative process. So everything that you're seeing there, they're just wearing their sweatpants. And I am basically guiding improvisations based on the themes within the show that I've written. And then I'm having them fulfill those themes, which are theatrical themes or intentions, but they have to use their tools, their props, whether it be juggling balls or a teeter board or whatever it is, to communicate those ideas between themselves. So there's not a lot of composition in what you just saw, but you're really seeing a playground of like how I can't tell a juggler to fulfill a scene the same way I would to like a hula hoop artist, because the dynamic of the object and the way that the person relates to the object and is going to express themselves with it is very different than the dynamic of, say, someone doing something with a bullwhip or, some of the crazy props that we use. And then you'd notice also in that, so there was doors and windows, which were sort of themes for that show in a set that was constantly moving and creating different tableaus from scenes. But I also had in there things like a laundry line. And the real key for me, unlike necessarily Pippin, is to sort of take things that normal people can reference as objects and intentions, and connect to that imagery so that then when the circus happens, it's not this foreign thing that they have no relationship to. And what I'm finding more and more with, say, the Cirque du Soleils of the world is that the audience is wowed, but they're not, you feel the height, you feel that this person is up in the air and it's scary, but you're not connected to the human that's up there. And so I think the intention of our company is always to create shows where the neurons of the audience is going, I could be that person, or that I could be up there with that person. And therefore, when the circus actually happens, you're pulled up to that level. You're inspired, as opposed to, oh, I'm so out of shape sitting on my chair. Like they're like superhumans. we're trying to take the superhuman factor out of the circus, which has been really our mission from the beginning. It's really the opposite of what Cirque du Soleil does in terms of storytelling. And I would even say what's interesting about that is then Pippin really is kind of more based on traditional circus and the wow and the extraordinary and run away to this thing. And yet I think the reason Diane hired me was to make that real for people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, even if Pippin is much more like, we don't do those big colorful costumes usually. Mostly in our circus, we don't do ta-da. Like I don't finish a trick and go, hey, everybody applaud for me, which you could do in the Fosse world. And because we're really breaking the floor and like net the fourth wall and applaud for us now. But that wasn't the goal in Pippin. The goal was this, we want to show you what the exciting, intoxicating lure, like this join us is there, but it's because we can relate. We can you want to be up here with me and have this good time because we're having a good time together. And so that was really what I found so interesting to like my first Broadway experience is something much more based on traditional circus, whereas I've spent my lifetime moving away from that.
I think there's also something too about how the audience gets invited into the event dictating how they're going to relate to the performance itself, right? Like I can think of those Cirque shows that I have seen where it is the wow factor, but I'm also in this gigantic arena. And so when those intimate moments come through, I sort of get lost because I'm like, I don't know, I'm here with like my popcorn and my pop and I'm like ready for some like give it to me. But in seeing the Seven Fingers work and also with Pippin, I feel like as an audience member, you come in ready to look for that smallness or that focus. And so then this other sort of hugeness really takes you to a different place than what you were saying.
Someone mentioned, and I was thinking this when we were talking about Patina and Matthew James Thomas, I really can't, I was specifically not talking about Andrea Martin because it's like kind of in many ways for me, the most important thing that happened for me during the creation was working with Andrea Martin. After the workshop, we didn't know what we were going to do with her. And I was definitely really nervous and knew the importance of this character. But Andrea was like, I need to do something that no one will expect. And we didn't find it until, and she haunted me. She was like, this has got to be something that's like crazy. And, we're thinking like putting her up in a harness or in a silks and whatever, just something that where she's going to be hanging there like a puppet. It was like, no, she had to be active. And it didn't hit me until well after we did the workshop where I dreamt of her with this younger man doing this pas de deux as like a memory of her lifetime in the circus. And that was going to be very romantic. It was not funny. I was like, we're not doing a comedy thing. And she insisted, even though Bertha comes out and says, humor handled by a master, she never made Bertha about being funny. It was always this really incredibly dramatic, melodramatic, beautiful, semi-tragic, but with just all of that kind of Fellini-esque joy. And so finding this routine for me was like the thing that pushed the entire show over the edge. It was really probably one of the proudest, it's a simple circus routine, but putting this woman with so much life and story into this simple routine it's probably the gem of my career. That's so much thanks to Andrea.
Yeah, it is also, it's always such an incredible thing to watch. And so much of going back to see Pippin on Broadway would be when new performers came into Bertha, seeing them do the trapeze is always so thrilling. And Andrea is another one of those. Is just such, in the similar way you're talking about circus performers, that she's sort of like always sort of like directing and writing herself in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
As a comedy performer. Gypsy, could I keep you over for like 5 minutes?
Go for it.
Okay, I know folks may have to leave, but we just got so lost in our conversation, and there are so many questions, and I've been negligent in managing the time. So I'm going to try to make up for that now. So we have here. A lot of this, like, can we watch Pippin again? Can it come back to the Loeb when the pandemic's over? Here's a great question. What are you most hopeful about for Circus in 2021 and from the years to come?
Well, I'm most hopeful for a renaissance for performing arts. Like, that's like when we get out of this, or when this current situation evolves into the new normal. I'm really excited about a renaissance in the performing arts. And I think it's been something that's been in the mix, but Circus, so many people come to see Circus with kind of like an expectation of what they want it to be. And I think Circus is in a way very much a dirty word still in the United States.
Sure.
And for a long time, I felt like Cirque du Soleil opened that up for us. Like, it blossomed and opened a lot of doors for contemporary circus. I was there I was in the tent for the very first run through of the very first Cirque du Soleil show in Little Tokyo in 1984. I'd been training with some of the performers there. We're sitting in the tent. It's 1,000,000 degrees. They start the show, no costumes, no makeup. And I literally started crying because I saw Cirque du Soleil did something that opened up this potential for being emotionally engaged with the performance that I hadn't experienced in my whole life, even though circus was probably the most emotional form of entertainment that I had seen. So I believe the future of circus, what I'm hoping for in the United States, is that people are going to open their minds to this kind of this idea that circus can open your emotional and intellectual vision of how of what art can be. And I think it's difficult because contemporary dance has its niche in the United States, and you can go see a contemporary dance show and be able to analyze it and be touched by it while accepting like a very large palette of within the form. And then you come to circus and everyone does this. And whereas circus really should be like, wow, what's happening? What does that image evoke? How does it relate to me in my daily life? So that my excitement is really for people to come see circus and just bask in the possibility of this non-linear world. We write our shows, Seven Fingers, with story and intent, and I think we will go further and further in that direction. But we also we want to leave the show up to the individual's interpretation. And that's something that I worry that in the United States has always been left to like contemporary art, where it's like, what is that? I don't know. If you're not telling me what it is, it's not a thing. And I hope for art and culture in the United States that this individualism people are going to be more open to, oh, that work stimulates me and I'm allowed to feel it and accept it and read it differently than everyone else. So that's what I hope for circus in the United States, at least.
Yeah, there's another question here that was said, if you could change one thing about the industry with a magic wand, what would it be? But I feel like you kind of is that. Also, someone asks, what's the next Gypsy Snider A.R.T collaboration? Well, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
One never knows.
One never knows.
Okay, we've talked about this a little bit, but I think it's a great thing to revisit. A friend of ours, extremely fortunate to have seen Pippin 2 times at A.R.T on Broadway and in Japan. Yeah. Wishing she could see it on Australia. She's responding to some of our comments, how Patina learned and mastered so many new skills. Some of what you were talking about, the lack of history or continuity in some current circus performers or contemporary circus performers. And the fact that many acrobats artists come from very geographic or ethnic backgrounds. How do you come to the same vocabulary in both performance and in language?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot. It really has to do a lot with casting, and that's been a challenge down the line, especially going to a new country. Japan doesn't have a huge contemporary or traditional circus history, so that was very difficult. We ended up hiring 2 Japanese performers and then 5 performers from around the world. And Australia has a really strong traditional and contemporary, so it was much easier to find people. But Sydney, much like New York City, is not a hub. Circus people tend to not go to the major metropolitan cities to settle down and have careers like you would in, say, New York City. So finding people, and then I have to do this thing where right when I hire them, I have to understand all of their skill levels. And then I start sending them videos of tricks and movement. I give them, everything from like, start watching Fosse, just like start watching it. And then imagine you're flipping, you roll on the floor and you land into that and what it does to your body. This is like anti-circus performer, like closing your shoulder blades in the back. We're all like this, like, So really connecting the performers to a larger vocabulary, me understanding how I can use them best. Like we have a woman doing a hair hang in Australia, which we'd never had in the show before, convincing the production to try a new skill. Like, hey, Diane, would you mind if there's this woman hanging by her hair? It's not the same as Rollabola in dynamic, which is then like musically, how do we change the music to create the same tension as the Rollabola, even though we're doing a hair hang? It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's what I thrive on. It's that creative, it keeps the show creative, which, I think every actor who takes on the roles in Pippin or in any Broadway show, you want to feel like you're bringing something to it. And I actually get to do that over and over and over again. There are times where it's more successful than other times. That's difficult.
Yeah.
And it takes time, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. There's a freshness there that I think doesn't always get to live with a production that's been going on for 8 years. We're so used to the ephemeral nature of what we do, right? Ben from Serious Juggling asked if there was a way to watch Pippin online. So sorry, Ben, not yet. Let's see what the pandemic has in store, but right now we do not have that ability. And then Joel Hertzfeld has written, and he says, when you're working to make a show that's socially conscious, relevant to the times, and a driver of change, what are some of the unique ways circus arts can be used to these ends that don't apply to other performing acts? And this kind of goes with a similar question that was about circus seems positioned well to speak to the last 4 years. I'm assuming this person means pretty specifically American politics. And this is our last question, but I want to throw that one out to you just to finish on.
Yeah, I have always, especially having been raised at the San Francisco Mime Troupe and being so politically conscious from a young age, I've always felt that political responsibility and art are one and the same. And I think that artists are in it inherently activists. That can sometimes disappear when you're kind of really into sort of capitalist show business genres. And even then, the responsibility of art is, and why art works, is when an audience member's mind and heart is opened to a new idea. And I think you've seen something good when you leave feeling like, oh my God, it opened these neurons in my brain or these emotions in my heart. And I become emotionally more intelligent after the show, and ideally intellectually also more intelligent. And intelligent can sound like a snobby word, but you really are trying to expand the minds and hearts of your audience members. And that's a responsibility. I want to go to a show that changes me, that opens me. So that is just a given for me. Circus, like I said, is very much based on the individual expression. So unlike, say, dance, where you're really trying to create, everyone has the same line. We don't have that. We don't work in that way. You can try and have synchronized things. It almost never works. So we have very different body types. We have very different stories. So a lot of things that theater and dance are sort of dealing with right now in terms of expression are not necessarily issues within the circus community. That said, really deeply understanding what systematic racism is and how that reacts specifically with circus is a very different conversation than it is necessarily in theater. And here I am, a white woman of a certain privilege that has my own company. I am in many ways my own boss, understanding the responsibility and where I need to sort of step back and go like, why are there not more men and women who don't look like me in my position? That's something that we've spent the year really looking at. I'm on several sort of committees to kind of change that. But we are lucky, as I said, in circus, that there isn't a standardized form. And so I think that right away automatically puts us in a really good position to make serious change in our department of the arts. And it's always been a priority for the Seven Fingers to really have a really wide range of stories and bodies, huge and not, so often in gymnastics and now in circus, this like thin little circus woman, that's not really the history of circus. Women have been like physical beasts on stage. And so we've always promoted that. We don't, and that's just one of the many ways that I think that circus is very well positioned to say, hey, you're seeing an individual with an individual story and an individual background. And you can relate to that person. Even if you think you can't, you can.
This has been so fun. Like I said, I just got so lost in it that I was like, oh my God, I have 5 minutes left for questions. So I appreciate you staying on, Gypsy, and spending a little more time. And thank you all for tuning in today. What a great conversation. We will have it available like we do with all of our lunchrooms online within a couple of weeks. So just give us some time to get that up for everyone to share. But with that, I think that closes us out for today. So thank you so much, Gypsy. And everyone, please join us again next week when I'll be in conversation with composer Brian Quijada. Great.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.